Hey y'all, it's Danielle from Black Business Boom, and I am so excited about the kickoff of our Black History Month series. This month, we're going to be talking to Black business owners about generational entrepreneurship, hearing the stories of their elders and how they've inspired their entrepreneurship journey. And today, I have a super duper special guest with me. I am really, blown away that she came to join me today for this series. But I am excited to introduce you all today to Diane Glenn, my grandmother. Welcome, Grandma. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, thank you. And how are you?
I am fantastic.
Well,
I
I'm glad to
am
be here with you this evening.
Yes, thank you for agreeing to do this with me. I've told the story quite a bit about, or some of the stories of how you have inspired my journey in the work that I do now with Black Business Boom, especially the work that we've started doing in the last 6 months with the micro loans and being able to actually get capital into the pockets of Black business owners through our micro loan fund. And, again, I've told that story of how you inspired a lot of that work in a lot of different ways. But one of them is because you were a banker. And growing up, I saw you do this work. I saw you interact with Black business owners on the west side of Chicago. And it just showed me the impact that you can have when you finance someone's dreams. So, for those that don't know, my grandmother was the president of the Community Bank of Lawndale, located on the west side of Chicago in the Lawndale community. Grandma, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, talk to me a little bit about the work that you did at the bank, specifically working with Black business owners and financing their dreams.
Well, let me just say to start, my goal when I first started in community banking, of course, that was not necessarily my career path or track. I just sort of led into it from community organization, community development, and then you begin to understand that Black economics is the key to creating healthy neighborhoods, healthy community, and and Black lifestyles that we want to have. So when I first got into community banking almost some 30 years ago, I set my goal as being able to create, I wanted to create at least five persons, persons, Black business people that become millionaires,
Mm.
or maybe not quite, but millionaires that could hire, create those jobs and keep recycling that money back into community and paying it forward. Now, with that, that meant you had to create a climate whereby you wanted these individuals to be those people of character who would do that.
Mm.
Fortunately, I was able that I met quite a few, a lot who had the same dream and the same skill set pretty much that I had, but never really had opportunities. They were, in real estate. Back in that day, we had a lot of we called them rehabbers, and they were flippers. In fact, that's when I first heard the word flip in the late 80s. Now, of course, because, we started and somebody takes it, now everybody's flipping. But, over the years, I was able to create those Black economic bases among, you know, um, entrepreneurs. And back in the 80s, 90s, there was a real drive among young Black people, as is now. It's really funny how everything repeats itself, and every other generation, they say, repeats itself. And so that was my goal to start off to do that. And that meant with that came a lot of education for our Black business people who have the skills, the knowledge, but they did not have the
The business acumen.
The business acumen. There you go. And that was always what was lacking and what you always had to drive home. It was important to have a good accountant. It was good to always have financial statements that, if someone asked you for those, you could pick those up and give them to them right away. It was good to be able to attend at least a class or two on business plan development. Anything that you could learn that would help, foster, move what you were doing forward. And, I was really fortunate because the West Side was really prime for that. It was a community where there was a lot lacking in every area, on every level. And it just seemed that there were some that were coming back home from college, having graduated and wanted to start businesses there. Some wanted to take over their parents' businesses, grow them. And so it was a good opportunity. And I'm really very proud that even today, I hear from at least 6 or 7 of those people every Christmas, every Mother's Day. And they always say, if it hadn't been for you. But we had to create that model, which means that we always got in, I won't say trouble, but what was it John Lewis said? Good trouble. You kind of take your chances and hope you pass the next exam. But you do it, you try to minimize as much risk as you can. It's community banking to me is like the lifeblood for Black business people, because once you become involved in it, you know what they need. You're closer to them. You're the one that sit across the table from them at a restaurant, and you listen to them, and you know what their hopes and dreams are. But you have to turn that passion into a balance of, I want to also be a good business person.
Absolutely. So
A
you
long, a
said,
long answer to that.
no, but I'm sure that people are like, oh, that's why she keeps talking about this. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
probably making sense to folks like why I'm so passionate about this work and why I'm always talking about you got to have a bookkeeper, you got to be doing your accounting, you got to be able to show a financial statement if you're asked for. That's how you're going to be able to finance your dreams. That's how you're going to
Mhm,
be able to get
mhm.
get the money. And why I also am always calling for the banks to step up and be involved in the communities and not just to check the box for
Yeah,
CRA credit, but to really
exactly.
understand the needs of the community and to really be there as partners to the nonprofits and the organizations, but really be boots on the ground, understanding the needs
Hmm.
of these small business owners. And then I always tell the story of, I guess this was over 10 years, probably about 12, 13 years ago. I was dating a guy on the West Side when I still lived in Chicago before I was married, of course. And this guy, somehow I met his parents. They lived on the block, and I was talking to his father, and somehow my grandmother came up, and his father was like, "Oh my God, that's your grandmother? She gave me the money to open my church." Like this man raved and went on about he would have never been able to open the doors to his church had it not been for you. Like, and so that's the type of impact that you were able to make. A lot of my early memories, especially as a teenager, were going over to George's music room and spending time, meeting different. I met Destiny's Child for the first time at George's
Yeah, I
music
remember
room, and some
that.
of my
Yeah.
idols at George's music room. And George still, if I call George right now, I text George right now, he still always answers for me and always looks out for me because of you, and because of the work that you did. So let's talk about the relationships, because you said some of these folks still reach out to you, they're still sending you cards because you formed a relationship with them and you were the president of the bank, but you
Mhm.
still formed relationships in the community. But talk to the business owners about the importance of them establishing those relationships in ways that they find the right banker for them.
Well, the advice I would usually give small business people starting out was that what you need to do is, if you can, if you have some collateral, maybe, save enough money where you get a certificate of deposit for $5,000, in a bank. And then you go and you ask for a loan against that money and you pay that money back. What you're doing is you're establishing a relationship with that bank, and you're establishing a track record with that bank, which is so important. Now, I don't really have a lot of information in terms of how these larger banks operate, but I always, almost always, steer small Black business people to smaller banks. It's easier to have relationships. You go into the bank a couple of times a week, you learn their names. As I said, you open these accounts, you borrow against them, you pay the loan back. So you're establishing relationships with your banker. And pretty much everybody there gets to know you. Because at some point, somebody's going to say, do you know Mrs. Jones or Mr. Smith or something? Maybe they had a check that came in that day and they would have been $50 overdrawn or $100 overdrawn. Sometimes that teller will say, oh, Miss Glenn, you can pay that. They usually come in here and they make a deposit on Friday. They'll be in here soon. Do you want me to call them? That's those are the kind of relationships I think it takes for you to be really successful. Is for you and your banker to form those relationships. Now, the unfortunate thing that I've had to witness over the last 10, 15 years is to see a lot of Black community banks go out of business. Why? I mean, I don't know. I've always thought it was coming. I've always felt that the examiners thought we were very difficult to examine, that we take on a lot of risk. We take those chances and we make those loans, even when we know the more pristine banks won't do it. But, I always, getting back to what you got to form those relationships. And they're just a myriad of reasons or ways that you can do that. I mean, you
Yeah.
can just come in. My door was always open. I had an open door policy and was always very criticized by my board for that. Anybody wanted to see me, they could see me.
Mm.
And,
Yeah, thank
so
you.
you get that reputation.
Yeah.
I think that's a good reputation. People start coming to your bank. We had people coming from the south side of Chicago that always said, oh, I'll never go to that little bank over there. That's not a real bank. But let me tell you, at the end of the day, I end up servicing a whole lot of people who said that and had to admit, after they heard about our reputation for doing business, our customer service, the fact that they could see the president, get good advice, somebody that would call you after 6 or 7 o'clock at night about your loan. That's how you build those relationships as a banker. And
And
that
it's,
takes
it's,
work.
it's yeah, I mean, and it takes work on the behalf of the customer or the small business owner, as well as the bank and the banker.
Exactly.
We have to meet in the middle when it comes to building strong relationships that lead to successful businesses and stronger communities for sure.
And
Um,
these banks really have to stop saying that they're committed to neighborhoods and they're committed to communities. It takes work. You got to put the work out there. You got to get to know your customers. Banking used to be a 9 to 5. Five was it? You didn't work on that. It's so competitive now that that's how community banks they get this niche or niche that they're able to create by finding who this group of small business people that they can serve, create a bit of business model for it, just as we did with church-based lending. Now I understand everybody's using the criteria that we developed, or they had started to use it before I left banking, because my last job was working with a bank that wanted to increase their lending with faith-based and church-based lending. And they knew I had the model. And the only way you get the model is to do the work and meet the people and know what their needs are. And then you can create the model.
And so to be able to, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So I love it. Um, Now to talk about black owned banks, and they are, I mean, we're losing them.
Hmm.
A lot of them. We've lost a lot of them over the last 20 years, I would say. And they do, in order for them to lend and in order for them to even keep their doors open, they need deposits.
Hmm.
So many times we're thinking about banks and we're thinking, why aren't they lending in the community? Some of these
Right.
smaller community banks, but it does take the community support of the bank in putting, like I took some money and just put it at Citizens Bank here in Nashville, the first
Hmm.
black owned bank in the country because, or the oldest black owned bank in the country because it was important that I have deposits over there because I want them to be able to lend to
Right.
the small business owners here in
Right.
Nashville. Real quick, can you talk about like the importance of the community in ensuring the success of black owned or community banks?
Oh, they're the one of the major or most significant pieces to all of this. As you say, you lend on deposits. You've got all these ratios in banking, your loan to deposit ratio, and they want you to have that ratio a certain way. Well, if you don't have the deposits, then you can't lend the money. And it's really just that simple. We used to have a lot of customers who would come and say, "Oh, I'll try you guys out. We'll just open a certificate of deposit for whatever." Well, we're paying you on that certificate of deposit. And then in order to make any money, if we're paying you 2 or 3% on your certificate of deposit, then we have to lend the money out at 2 or 3% over. But if you open a checking account,
Mm.
and we're not paying you interest. I mean, we have accounts that can do that, money markets, now accounts. But just take a chance and walk into a bank and open a checking account.
Oh,
You keep balances of what, $10,000 or something that enables them to lend that money, sometimes at a lower rate, sometimes, but to lend more money. So I mean, it's deposit development was always a very key part of what I did. And
yeah,
with government, you go out to public, the city, you go out and you ask for deposits. The first thing they want to do is to give you a CD. Well, I just told you about that.
yeah.
You got to then you have to find a way to make sure that if anything happens, they'll get their money back. So then you go and buy a certificate of deposit that collateralizes that certificate of deposit that they gave you to make sure. So, it's almost very difficult, but, for a community to put its faith in a community bank with deposits means a lot to a community bank. And we're losing them.
Yeah.
And, we better keep an eye out because, I've predicted 20, 25 years ago that we would be back to the same old big
Mhm.
banks serving America
Yeah.
because they really don't know what to do with community banks. They don't really know how to examine them. They just don't know. But we've got to start. We've got to. We had more banks, 10 black banks 10 years ago, 20 years ago than we have
Yeah.
now. What's
Crazy.
wrong with that? That's something. Is that by design that we're being pushed out, or I mean, it's
We can talk
something to
about
think about.
that for sure. No, and I mean, we have, like I said, the oldest black-owned bank here in Nashville, and many times I'll talk to folks, and they're like, "Oh, it's a black-owned bank in Nashville."
Yeah.
And so, those that have a voice and have a following, I urge you to use that voice to support these community institutions that are here to support our communities. Also, we should see these larger corporations and larger banks putting deposits in these smaller
Hmm.
community banks as well, because they can go put a lot more money than I can go put, in
Exactly,
Citizens Bank.
exactly,
So it's
exactly,
something that we
exactly.
all can be doing. It would take probably 100 of me to, do what Amazon could go do in one deposit, so one simple deposit that's a drop in a bucket for them. So we all play a part in supporting our community institutions. Before we wrap up, I really want to, because this conversation we started talking about, the role of banks in entrepreneurship and your role at the bank in supporting entrepreneurship, but we do have some history of entrepreneurship in our family. And I'm always really proud to talk about my family, the work that you've done. Uncle John, John Hartman, my uncle, who is a famous jazz musician. But one person we don't talk about a whole lot is Uncle Herman. And so my
Mhm.
Uncle Herman was the first Pepsi distributor, Black Pepsi
He was the
distributor.
first Black Pepsi Cola distributor, if not in the country, in Chicago, period.
Yeah.
He had
And
a very large district. He went, if you can, 47th, you could remember 47th to 55th, the Lake to State Street. That's a pretty large area here in Chicago. But when he started his business, I'm not sure, nobody ever really told the story other than he started as a driver, I think, maybe, and just decided I could do this. He opened an office, he applied, he got it. And I mean, he kept that distributorship, oh my God, 30, 40 years maybe.
mm,
And I can remember him telling stories how he and his driver, when they would come this way where I live, east of, closer to the lake, they would drive with shotguns on their laps because they didn't know what they were going to encounter. They had to sometimes, just pretend that they weren't the owners or the distributor, that they were just employees of the company, which they were to a degree. But having a distributorship really meant that you kind of owned your
mm,
part of that business, and then you hired your drivers, and then you went out and you sold your product. But he did very well. I mean, he retired from the business to the extent that I had another uncle, your Uncle Edward, that did Old Dutch the same way, but he came along maybe 10, 15 years later. So there's sort of a history of entrepreneurship in the family. Yeah, you
yeah, I mean, and even Hermine,
yeah, I was going to say your cousin Hermine, yes.
yeah, so my Uncle Herman's daughter went on to be an entrepreneur and start Indigo MAGA paper in Chicago. So if you're in Chicago, I'm sure you've picked up an Indigo or seen an Indigo paper at some time over the last. I mean, it's been around for decades. So
Well, now
it,
don't leave you and your mom out. You guys
well,
ran your spa for 3 years. You opened
yeah,
and ran
yeah.
your spa from, was it
Yeah, for
2013 to
almost a little
2000?
over 4 years, really, since we were, we had some challenges with getting the doors open, and I talk about that a lot. That we went through a lot just to be able to open the doors. But I think that I've I've always had entrepreneurship
Yeah,
in my
always, yeah,
blood. Like it's always been. I think part of it is I've always liked freedom and to be able to
yeah,
just do
yeah,
whatever I want to
yeah,
do
yeah.
whenever I want to do it and sleep late and all those things. And entrepreneurship felt like the way that I would be able to do that,
And that
to
is,
live.
I mean, you could do it peacefully, you know, peacefully.
Yeah,
Now
without
you
anybody being
have,
like, you ain't logged in yet, so it felt like my way out. And even my father always told me, you always have some sort of hustle. He
yep.
he told me that probably when I was 19 or 20. And so even when I was going to school for my MBA and I was a banker, I bartended, I drove Uber, I've cleaned houses. I mean, I've always kept some sort of hustle in, I think it just has been in me since probably birth, and then
Yeah,
being in Antonia, I don't think that my family really knew. But me and Antonia used to walk around the neighborhood and ask people if we could walk their dogs
Yeah, I
when we were
remember. Yeah.
about 12. You know, we would go out. So we always had this like hustle and drive in us. And part of that was just, you know, we wanted to be able to shop. We wanted to be able to go to parties. We wanted to be able
Mhm.
to do things. And so,
Right.
you know, now it's bigger than, you know, just me wanting the freedom, and it's really the mission that keeps me going every day. You know, it's the mission that, you know, I'm not giving anybody the money to open the doors to their church, but you know, a $5,000 micro loan can
Yeah.
absolutely help you go and get some, you know, material or
Mhm.
some inventory that you need to be able to sell to your customers and not have that gap. So yeah, I mean, now it's like the inspiration of, you know, all the people who have inspired this journey for me, led me to where I am today, and it's the entrepreneurs that I work with every day that keep me
And
going.
you have to keep doing it. You just have to keep doing it until we get it right, because God knows we haven't gotten it right yet, but we will if we keep trying. So
Yeah. And that's the thing. We just keep on moving. We keep on trying. And, you know, the community support absolutely helps. The
yeah,
corporate support absolutely
believe
helps. And so
right.
it takes all these different pieces coming together for us to really see success. And like you said, I mean, it's disheartening to see that, you know, we're losing community banks, black owned banks, but we are seeing a growth right now in black owned businesses. And I think we have to ensure, it takes the job of all of us to
Yeah,
ensure that those businesses are successful, because like you said, those are the ones that are going to go and hire in our communities. Those are the ones that are going to tie to our churches to keep the doors to the churches
right.
open. We
Exactly.
are the ones that
Yeah.
we need. We are the ones that our communities need. So yeah, this has been great, Grandma. I told her, I was like, we're gonna talk about 10, 15 minutes. But it's been such great conversation, and I mean, we hit on so many different points, and so I'm really excited for this entire series and to be able to talk to other Black entrepreneurs about their journey and how those that have come before them have inspired them. Any words you want to wrap us up with, Grandma?
Well, listening to you speak, I said I could remember when you told me you wanted to get out of corporate America and you tried, like you say, you were doing the Uber, you were doing all of this. And I know there were times when you were a little, maybe rethinking that decision. And I think I told you one day down at the spa, you just kind of looked down to me and I said, Daddy, don't ever stop believing in yourself. And that's the same thing I would tell a business owner today. You just got to push through it. Just don't ever stop believing in yourself that you can do it. And I just believe, Jesse Jackson said, if you can conceive it, you can believe it. If you can believe it,
Yeah.
you do it. So
So,
those are only words of wisdom, and support your black banks. I remember Jim Young from Citizens, my kudos to him. I think he's not with the bank anymore, but he was a great banker at Citizens, and we just have to keep doing everything we can do.
absolutely. And I'll tell you one thing that you said to me that always sticks with me, uh, on those days where I'm like, I don't know, is one day I don't remember where we were or how long ago it was, and you told me you chose the right path. And it was another one of those days where I don't know how you knew there's something that I was bothered, or I was thinking maybe I should have done this, or comparing myself to other people or whatever it was. And you looked at me and you said, you chose the right path.
Yeah, yeah.
And I literally at least once a month have to remind myself, you chose the right path.
You
You
chose the
know,
right. Yeah,
and
yeah,
those words are the words that I use when I talk to other Black business owners as well, and let them know that, you know, just last night I was talking to a young lady who was freaking out and, you know, had to go back to work from, you know, being a full time entrepreneur. And I told her, you know, I know it doesn't seem like you're right now, but you're gonna look back in 2 or 3 years and know that everything happens for a reason. That and everything is gonna be okay. Like when I had to go back to work after quitting my job and trying to be full
Yeah,
time, I was embarrassed. I didn't, it was a mess. I felt all the things.
yeah,
And I had to remind myself, you chose the right path. Whatever that
yeah.
is, you chose the right path, and everything will be okay, and it will work out, as long as you keep the faith. And that's
Well,
what I
I'll tell you,
feel.
when I left IBM in the late 60s, after having been sent there by the Urban League to blaze this trail, and I had done my 2 years, and I went to the West Side to work. My family, I thought they were going to have an intervention because they did in fact each come to me individually, uncles as well. But I chose the right path, and having made a difference in so many people's lives, I know I chose the right path. So
Absolutely. And that is all, folks. This has been fantastic. I'm gonna leave it with that. I don't think there's anything more to say, especially when you are making impact in other people's lives. You have absolutely chose the right
chose the
path.
right path, right?
Yeah. This has been great, Grandma. Again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. I'm excited to have this and to tell your story to my followers. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. And stay tuned because there is more coming in this series of generational entrepreneurship. Family business is the name of the series. So look out for our other interviews coming over the coming weeks. Thanks again, Grandma. Thanks for tuning